complete earthquake. This was an earthquake unlike any earthquake I've really seen since Ronald Reagan in 1980. It just came out of nowhere. Nobody expected. I mean, Pennsylvania, Republicans haven't won it since '88. Wisconsin, Republicans haven't won it since '84. And I can just tell you, as a Republican, we don't do well in Senate races, in blue states, in presidential year elections. Something happened last night that will forever shake up the coalitions that make up the Republican and Democratic Party.
There have been many, many historic, astounding, shocking moments over the course of this campaign involving Donald Trump, starting with him entering the race on the escalator, him winning a debate, him taking the lead in the polls, him winning a primary, him gaining the nomination. None more shocking, though, to me than last night when we heard the report on the air from Kristen Welker that Secretary Hillary Clinton had called Donald Trump to concede the election. And you're right, we sat here 12 hours ago and we looked at an electoral map that seemed impossible, frankly. We said he'd have to win every one of these traditional toss-up states, Joe. Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, Iowa. He took care of that. But not only would he have to do that, he'd have to flip states that Republicans don't win. He did that. Wisconsin, first time a Republican's won that since 1984. Pennsylvania, first time since '88. The vote's still out in Minnesota, where a Republican hasn't won since 1972.
Where I think that's symbolic. Mark Halpern, a lot of people mocked Donald Trump for going to Minnesota this past weekend, just like they mocked the operation. As you know, the Trump campaign started telling people 2 weeks ago they could win in Michigan. Obviously, Ronald Reagan, one of his chief assets, was being underestimated. The campaign organization, and specifically the data operation that Jared Kushner was running for his father-in-law, caught everybody by surprise.
Yeah, I'm hoping Kellyanne Conway opens up her polling operation because she says their polling showed all this. And I spent last Friday at Trump Tower talking to Kellyanne Conway and to Jason Miller, the communications director, Dave Bosse, the deputy campaign manager. They all, big smiles on their face, we're winning. All of them said, we're winning. I said, are you ahead? They said, we're winning. I thought at the time, you know, they got to bluff this. But I talked to them last night. Same thing. They all said, our data showed us winning. So data may not be dead. Bad data should be dead.
And even last night, Mika, even when we had those early exit polls that showed Trump losing 5 of 6 states, you call over there, you talk to the campaign team, completely placid. Jared Kushner told me at 6:30, he said, I know what the exit polls say. I'm looking at our numbers. And Jared said, we're going to win Michigan. We're going to be competitive in Wisconsin. We're looking good in Minnesota. And he said, we're going to win Florida.
But they were really measured. You spoke to Donald himself, and he was incredibly measured. John Hellman, over the past week, I have to say, you kept talking about the path. Joe kept talking about there is a path. There is a path. And he would write it out for people. And I don't know if anyone saw it. It was almost as if it was like he was being mocked. I mean, did anybody see this path?
Well, a few people did. Obviously, a couple people on this sitting around this table did. You know, we did. You know, I went out. I'm talking about Joe and Mark. You know, who've been talking about this for a while. You know, I think it's one of the things that when we were shooting the circus last week, I was out in Los Angeles and sat down with 4 of the smartest people I know in politics: Mike Murphy, Bob Shrum, Fred Davis, Bill Carrick, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. All 4 of them basically said, "Well, I don't see the path." I mean, Fred was the only one who left it open, but all 4 of them said. 3 of them said the race, no chance, no way Donald Trump could win. Right. Fred Davis said, well, there's a 1 in 100 chance that Donald Trump could win. And those 4 guys, again, across party, smart guys, have all run or been intimately associated with presidential candidates.
Speaking of L.A., you know L.A., you're from L.A., we did have the reverse Bradley effect. Yeah. People would not admit they were voting for Donald Trump because they watched TV every day, and everybody every day said Trump was a racist, he was a bigot, he was a xenophobe, he was a misogynist.
And it could never happen.
Asked this question, if that's on TV all day and somebody calls you up and says, who are you voting for? You don't say Donald Trump.
There is going to be an incredible, long, deep, rigorous autopsy done on the polling that pervaded this campaign.
It's horrific.
Public polling and the Clinton campaign's own data, which obviously was wrong in a lot of ways. But one of the most powerful and illustrative examples of this is something that was very persuasive to a lot of people, including me. The fact that Hillary Clinton had a vast lead, for 6 months with white college-educated voters. Huge lead among white college-educated women and a big lead with white college-educated men. And when the numbers came in last night, she still won, but they were vastly shrunken and much smaller. And that's the group that you're talking about.
There is the Bradley effect right there, Mike. I can't tell you how many professionals Mika and I spoke to over the past year that in a crowd setting would not admit that they were voting for Donald Trump, but they would take us to the side after the meeting or after the speech or after the lunch, and they'd say, I'm voting for him. I'm just sick and tired of this. I'm voting for him. And I think John's onto a great point here. It is the college-educated whites that we're not going to admit that to polite society.
Well, and just to clarify, I'll just say one thing just to make sure this is clear. She ended up winning white college women by only 6, and she lost white college men, which she'd been leading by a dozen points for months. So it's a huge turnaround in this particular segment, which was a big part of the reason why a lot of people thought Trump could not win.
Again, the very people, Mike, who would not admit to polite society they were voting for Donald Trump.
I'm sure there was a reverse Bradley effect in some quarters. I have no doubt about that. But I think in the country at large, there was no reverse Bradley effect. It was just people who were going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what. No matter what he said, no matter what he did, no matter how he behaved. They were determined to vote for Donald Trump, and they were ignored. They were ignored by pollsters, they were ignored by the media, and they showed up yesterday in astounding numbers, a wave of people across the country that I think has rendered both political parties in this moment irrelevant.
Let's be very, very clear here. Willie, this was not the Democratic Party that got caught, like, napping. This was the Democratic Party in Washington, and this was the Republican Party in Washington. This shocked both political parties, and it is much of a threat to the Republican establishment that has run Washington, D.C. for the past 30 years, as it is for the Democratic Party establishment, who now really has a civil war on their hand, a political battle.
We called Donald Trump many months ago a middle finger to the establishment in this country, to Washington, to us in the media, and his voters gave the big middle finger last night. I'll give you a couple, to your point, in Iowa, 2008 among white men. Barack Obama tied. He won the state. He tied among white men. Last night, according to our exit polls, Donald Trump won white men by 31 points there.
Holy cow.
A spread of 30 points in 8 years.
By the way, that's a state, Willie, that Republicans have just grown used to losing. I had Joel Benenson on the other day who said, no, well, we've split it 3-3. No, we've lost Iowa, I think, 5 out of 6 times by 30-plus points.
And I'll give you another example. In the state of Pennsylvania, Hillary Clinton actually outperformed Barack Obama of 2012 in the Philly suburbs. Remember, we saw all those polls over the last few weeks, and we said, my gosh, she's crushing him in the suburbs. That spells doom in Pennsylvania. Well, the turnout among white men, among rural white voters in the rest of Pennsylvania was so large that it offset a performance by Hillary Clinton that was better than Obama's in 2012.
You know what I just remembered with these numbers that you just told me? I just had a flashback. Vice President Joe Biden, Mike, telling us, your good friend Joe Biden, telling us back in Cleveland, back in Philadelphia at the Democratic Convention, we have got to reconnect with white middle class, white working class voters, or it's going to cost us. That's something that Ed Rendell, a guy who knows something about winning the state of Pennsylvania, warned Democrats about 2 days ago. They saw this coming.
The three of us, Mark, you, and I, were talking just yesterday morning at 5:45 in the morning yesterday about Pennsylvania on Sunday, the vice president in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, in Scranton. Large crowds, fairly large crowds, and you just got the sense that while they loved Joe Biden and loved listening to Joe Biden and heard his message, they were quite reluctant about the top of the ticket.
By the way, let's just say it right now. Joe Biden's, I saw a poll.